spinning back to the open side. Kurtley lovely ball here for Simmo, who's quick. Pete Simmo looking for Kurtley. Back to Simmo. Oh, that is wonderful. That is wild. That is amazing from the Wallabies.
Welcome to Pick and Drive Rugby. We are the People's Podcast, providing a platform for rugby lovers to come together and support the game that's played in heaven. Match reviews, player interviews, quality rugby chat that is consistent and positive. We do it all for you, our dear listeners. I'm your host, Ando. With me is Mitch. And we also have Simmo, a massive Western Force fan. Been on the pod a few times. Simmo, how are you, mate?
I'm very well. It's good to be back and talking rugby again. It's been on the news a bit more lately for good reasons and bad reasons, as I'm sure we'll get into a little bit later. But I'm excited and ready to talk rugby.
Mate, we're very happy to have you here. Mitch, are you well, my friend?
I am well. And I think last time we had Simon on the podcast, he had a clean shave. So it's good to see he's back with a full head of hair. So I don't know if that is that previous one is a nod to previous captain Nathan Sharp, or who are you styling tonight? James O'Connor?
I want you to style
I guess
Jeremy
maybe
Thrush, mate.
I've got a mullet, so I guess I think Bailey Kunzel's got a bit of a mullet, doesn't he? So investing in the youth, just trying to build up their notoriety. That's all.
Yeah, look, I can't ever support a mullet, so I'm really disappointed that we've actually let you onto the podcast. You stuck that one through. But either way, ladies and gentlemen, what an
on the front, it's fine.
That's true. We can't actually see unless you turn sideways.
Yeah.
So face forward, please. Face forward. Ladies and gentlemen, why don't I quickly run through what is happening within this pod? So this is actually our second podcast for the week within our Western Force preview. Mitch was able to catch up with Isaac Rodder, and that was released on Monday. So hopefully you've got your ear holes around that and been able to hear some of his chat about how he's doing, some of his thoughts on his time with the Queensland Reds and the departure there, which was fairly acrimonious at the time, as well as his hopes looking forward for the Western Force. So just wanted to say that in terms of what we're going to be covering tonight, Mitch has a trivia segment ready for us. And not only are we doing the much vaunted and much promised bit of trivia, but we also have an Aussies Abroad segment, which will be coming up soon. That involves Lockie from Scrumbags, and we'll be talking through very briefly some of the involvement and good moments from Australians across men and women's rugby around the globe. And then the main course, if you will, for tonight will be the Western Force preview. Now, there's a lot to get through, but we really can't go any further without touching on the Eddie update, the Eddie Jones announcement of him being the new Wallabies coach. We've already done a special emergency pod on it. We don't need to go through it in a huge amount of detail, but Simmo, just really, really quickly, mate, what do you make of Eddie Jones's announcement and the changes that have happened at the top of the Wallabies coaching ladder?
I guess currently we don't really know what a lot of the changes are. I think he's gone on the record saying that when he comes in, he's going to be talking to people who had time in the seat already and just figure out if they do want to continue under him. He is known not to be the easiest person to work with at times. I'm just loving him already taking shots at NRL and having a bit of banter, which, I think it's good for rugby.
Maybe Peter Vlandis needs to get out of the TAB. I really enjoyed that chat.
Yeah.
Not being able to remember his name and calling him, that horse guy. That horse guy. Oh, God, Eddie. Don't change, mate. Don't change. Now, there are a couple of thoughts which Eddie has given in a 30-minute interview to some Australian rugby journos. And that were around, those thoughts touched on many different areas, but the points I wanted to start with were his thoughts around number 10. He did explain why he'd referenced Ben Donaldson and Tane Edmed so carefully or so precisely when talking or when asked previously about upcoming number 10s. And he clearly said it's because he'd seen them play in person when he was in town for the England tour. So that was part of it. But he also said that really, at this point in time, the Wallaby number 10 for the World Cup will be the player who has both a combination of experience and maybe level-headedness and the best form going into the World Cup. So that was an interesting statement. Mitch, what did you make of that?
Yeah, look, when it first sort of came out, we were sort of wondering whether that meant that he had a New South Wales bias, which, you know, being born and bred here, you can't forgive the man. Like, it makes sense. We create the best rugby players in this state. We don't really need to look abroad too widely.
Them out to other people as well. Yep.
That's right. But no, in all seriousness, that makes there was a lot of talk, particularly in our group chat around or on our Discord server. A little plug there. If you're not involved, get involved because it's a good little bit of fun.
Get involved.
But there was a lot of chat there whether that meant or what that meant for Noah Alessio. So it was good to see that he did kind of follow up on those claims and say, the only reason I spoke about those guys is because I have seen them play, which doesn't mean that Noah's not on the sheet anymore. Which would, for his development, be horrible to think that had he been sort of so badly handled with Dave Rennie and then Eddie Jones comes in and looks at a completely new set of number 10s and overlooks Noah, and who knows where that leaves him in Australian rugby. So from that perspective,
it leaves him out of Australian rugby, mate.
Well, not forever. I mean, look at Quade Cooper. You never say never in this game. So who knows? But for the immediate future, at least there were questions there, but I think it means that he really is looking to see who puts their hand up in this Super Rugby season and really wants to see the players step up and sort of put in a performance that says, pick me for that Wallabies position.
Yeah, interestingly, he did mention that James O'Connor, he sees him more as a utility backline player rather than a straight 10 when he was followed up with about why he hadn't mentioned Jock around that fly half position. But moving to the captaincy, Simmo, when Eddie was asked about who he thought would be the captain, he mentioned that he needed to speak with the players, see where Hoops' head was at, and just talk with the senior leadership group. And once he'd actually maybe got them into a camp that he was running, he'd be able to make that decision a little bit clearer. If you had to use a crystal ball and predict the future, who are you picking as the likely candidates for the Wallabies captaincy under Eddie Jones?
It's kind of quite difficult to really say. I mean, as Eddie said, every captain and coach duo is quite unique, and him coming in as a coach this close to the World Cup, he needs to find the captain that's going to be able to complement him as a coach the best. So, I mean, obviously, Michael Hooper's been made the Wallabies captain by 3 or 4 coaches in a row now, or something like that. So, if Eddie does it, maybe all the naysayers can finally shut up because we finally got another person coming in and putting him as captain. But honestly, I guess it really depends on where his head's at. It becomes difficult with the senior members being Slipper and Alatoa, who are obviously, not going to be on the pitch for the entire 80 minutes. So it does, raise some questions. I think, when he joined England, he just threw someone in that no one was expecting. So I can't personally predict. Yeah, exactly. So I personally can't predict right now where it's going to go, but it's always fun when it comes to Eddie Jones. So we'll see what happens.
Well, this is a bit of a Western Force flavored podcast. So I personally wouldn't be too surprised to see him name someone like Isaac Rodder, who is a new name in terms of leadership for the Wallabies. Hasn't had as many caps under Dave Rennie as we probably would have liked to see him play through injury or not selection, those sorts of things. But if he was going to go to someone who's outside of the squad, who brings in a new sort of flavor than what the Wallabies are used to, Isaac Rodder is probably the perfect player who sort of puts his hand up.
Yeah, he's an 80-minute player as well, so it wouldn't surprise me if that is in his favour, having a captain on for the whole time. But let's keep on moving forward. I'm sure there'll be more stuff to talk about with Eddie in the coming weeks anyway. There was really, really difficult news to hear about the charges that have been levelled against Kurtley Beale for, and well, I guess we'll just say, I mean, we are a family-friendly podcast, but at the same time, this is a real element of what's happened to a player within Australian rugby circles. So for accusations of sexual assault, which have been committed, supposedly, or accused to have been committed by Kurtley Beale. So he has been arrested. He was initially granted bail. He's since then been released with the hearings set in, was it February or March off the top of my head?
March, 22nd of March, I think is the date that he goes back in front of the court.
Okay. Yeah, okay. So with all that being said, I mean...
And I guess the follow-up to that too is that Rugby Australia has acted quickly on this, which was good to see. We weren't being reactionary for once, which was good. But they've come out and made a statement that says that Kurtley Beale has been stood down effective immediately from both New South Wales Waratahs and Rugby Australia, all commitments until the end of the proceedings. So what that leaves at the moment, I think that basically rules him out of Super Rugby this year because, I mean, if he's not fronting the courts until March, and then if that gets adjourned again, we may not know an outcome of this case until much later in the year. So I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see Kurtley for the rest of the year.
Wouldn't be surprised. Simmo, your 2 cents on this?
Obviously, it's just, a horrible thing. And there's the human aspect of obviously the young woman who was involved, and Kurtley's, newly born child and his new wife and everything. So I just hope that the truth comes out and justice prevails. Until then, we can't really make any judgment until we know more details and everything gets unpacked a bit more. But obviously, thoughts go out to the family and the victim.
Yeah, and I mean, there's the truth. The reality is, we always need to be aware that someone is innocent till proven guilty, and fair enough. But if let's assume that something untoward has happened, which has been enough for these charges to be labelled. Sometimes I think in rugby union circles, we can at times take a bit of a moral high ground over other sports, particularly rugby league, with some of the off-field indiscretions that players get up to. But what this really
Simon,
does,
do you know
is
what
just
rugby
bring
league
home...
is? They don't have that over there in the West.
Yeah, it's that game that they made simple. Yeah, it's simplified union, right? That's the one. Right?
Six tackles,
basically
turn it over.
Nothing above
honestly,
6. Nothing above 6.
Because I grew up overseas and playing rugby, and I just thought rugby league was a training drill for union. Honestly,
Not wrong.
Back to what I was saying, though, what this does do is it highlights the fact that there still is, without a shadow of a doubt, even just within some of the chat that like my mates and stuff have, a strong streak that needs to be addressed about how women are treated in Australian society. And so if this all does come into a guilty judgment or some similar thing, I hope that particularly the Waratahs can have an opportunity to maybe promote things like the Man Cave AU, or ways in which men can be addressing their own areas of need for self-improvement and self-growth, particularly in the way in which they are engaging with and thinking about women. But anyway, I think that's enough kind of on that point. Basically, is there any other news that we needed to be chatting about prior to jumping into the trivia segment?
We do have the results from the Hamilton Sevens over the weekend.
Go for it.
Bit of a disappointing result for both the men and the women. The Aussie teams, I'm just going off the top of my head here. I don't have it written down in front of me, but I believe the men finished 5th, and they played Fiji in the 5th place playoff, and the women finished 3rd, and they played. Actually, no, I think the men ended up playing. I think both men and women ended up playing Ireland for both the 3rd and the 5th place spot. But the men, I think, won their 5th place playoff, and the women won theirs as well. But disappointing weekend overall as we coming in. This is the second leg of 2022-2023 season of the World Series, and being world champions last year for both the men and the women, we were probably hoping a little bit more. Again, this tournament, I think, goes to show the minute mistakes can be so costly in this game. If you see the women in their quarterfinal against America, the final play was a questionable call of knock on, which
it was just wrong.
Yeah, we don't want to come out here and say referees get things wrong, but it was a tough call and it was made in the decision. But disappointing for the women that they weren't able to get through to the final to play New Zealand. But what is promising is that this coming weekend is the Sydney Sevens. So 27th to the 29th in Sydney at the new Allianz Stadium. If you don't have your tickets and you are Sydney based, do get them because it's going to be fantastic atmosphere across the 3 days. So do make an effort to get there. We'll both be there,
involved,
and it will be fun. I'm looking forward to seeing both.
There's going to be a few fans there, so we're going to meet up and have a couple of beers, bit of a feed as well at the game.
Yeah, and it's going to be a good chance. It's been a while since we've seen both the Aussie men's and women's team play on Australian soil with fans being able to attend and sort of cheer them along. So if not to forget this weekend's results and just look at this coming weekend's results, but also an opportunity to cheer for them and to sort of show your appreciation for the amazing season that was 2022.
Yeah, without a doubt. Okay, let's move on, my friends. Let's get into the trivia, and I'm handing this over to you, Mitch.
Well, we're not actually doing trivia, so this is one of our fun segments that we've got for the podcast this year. I'm calling this one "Name That XV" or "Name That 15." So what I'm doing is this is our Western Force preview. This is a little bit fun. Hopefully, you guys are able to answer this question. But what we have to do is name as many players as you can from the first ever Western Force starting 15. So their first game. Simon, do you know when the first game the Western Force played, who it was, and when? You know, off the top of your head?
I was there, but I think I was like 12 years old, so a while ago. It was no, I can't tell you. Sorry.
2006 against the Brumbies, first game at Subiaco Oval against the Brumbies. First ever game for the Western Force. Now, are either of you able to name more than 2 or 3 players from this starting 15? Is that too hard?
Well, you'd have Nathan Sharp, who was the captain. I believe Cameron Shepherd was playing 15 at the time.
Ooh.
Oh, no, not right. Or was he on the wing?
No, he wasn't. He wasn't. He actually wasn't in the 15. So I don't know if
okay.
he was in the 23 at that point or not, but he wasn't in the 15.
Okay, that must have been a little bit later. Well, Matt Gidder at 10.
No, actually, Matt Gidder was playing for the Brumbies in that game.
Oh, was he? Cool. Yeah. See, my memory's not that good then. Yeah, I guess I can't. Name that many.
Ando? Anyone?
Matt Hodgman?
Western Force fans are just screaming at us over into their podcast apps. Yes, Matt Hodgman played 7.
Yeah, good. Get in. Come on, that's 1. Thank you. All
right. This seems
Kieran,
like
I know he was there for ages.
A task too hard for both of you, so I'll make it easier. Let's go to the reintroduction of Super Rugby. Name that 15. How many players can you name from the 2020 game against the Waratahs in their first game back in Super Rugby, technically Super Rugby AU?
Yeah, okay, cool. All right. Now, did they still have Kubeli at 9 at this point?
No, I believe
that's
it was
Brumbies.
Prior.
What am I thinking? That's Brumbies. Prior is what I meant to say. It would have been Prior.
Yep. Prior at 9.
Prior at 9. Then was Hooker Katu still? Well, not still, but at that point.
He was, yes.
Okay. Kieran Longbottom?
At?
Prop.
Which
One
side?
Of the props. I can't remember which side.
Okay, he was 3.
50,
yep.
50.
He was tight head. Yep.
Okay, cool. Who would loose head prop have been then? Was that Medrano?
No.
Robertson?
It was Angus Wagner.
Yeah,
Angus Wagner. Yeah, okay, cool. Okay, so that's the front row sorted. If we go into locks, Jeremy Thrush.
Yep.
Who else was a locking partner when they came back in? Was it Sidolaki Tamani?
No.
No, Tamani hadn't played any, I think, for the Force.
Yeah, I don't think Tamani played for the Force until, 2022 or end of 2021.
Even then, he only played a couple of games prior to the COVID requirements that he wouldn't follow. Who's the other lock then? Come on, Force fan, you should know this.
Mate.
You're going to kick yourself. You're going to absolutely kick yourself.
Fergus Lee Warner.
Yeah, Fergus Lee Warner.
Oh.
Yeah.
How could I forget my boy?
Your boy. Okay, cool. Kane Kateka at 6 or 7?
No. Not for this game.
Brynard Stander at 8?
Yes. Stander was 8.
Stander was 8. Who would their flankers have been? I'm assuming Ollie Callan is too young for this. because he's only come onto the scene in the last year or so. Jackson Hughes.
Yeah, he's only
as
just
All right, this
recently
is probably
joined.
dragging on a little bit, and it's probably getting a bit too boring for fans. So I'll give you a chance to name 3 more players that were within the final position. So we've got 6, 7, and then 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So if you can name 3 players, I'll give you full marks.
Okay. You go, Simmo.
I think Kahui was involved at that time, wasn't he?
No.
Oh, so he would have been on the
Bench.
bench if he wasn't starting. Let's go with Godwin, Carl Godwin.
No.
Yeah, Godwin
serious?
wasn't until the year after.
This is
No,
their
'cause
first.
this was-
Remember, this
this
was
was
their
our first
first
one.
inclusion in
It
Super
was,
Rugby. This was
global.
the emergency pull together of players.
Yeah, because this was essentially the global rapid rugby team.
Yeah.
Byron Ralston. Byron Ralston. Mitch.
Yes, 14. Yep, he was playing 14. So you've got one.
McGregor playing 15 at the time.
He was. Yep, Jack McGregor, 15.
McGregor, yeah. And on the other
And who was on the other wing? So would that have been Pulu, or did he not come across?
And if you don't
by
get
then?
this, I'll be very disappointed. We interviewed him that year. So
Oh God. Oh
who
God.
have we interviewed
Who
from
have we
Western
interviewed?
Force?
We have interviewed Ian Pryor. Oh.
No, we didn't. Have we got him, Brett? Yeah.
Yes, I've interviewed
I don't think we
Ian
have.
Pryor. Yes, I have. Number
We.
10.
I just want to say I'm not a fan of this segment.
Lance, oh my God,
5,
I'm having such a mental blank.
4, 3,
Come on,
2,
what's your fly half? Lance.
1. John O'Lance.
John O'Lance.
Yeah.
That's
John
it.
O'Lance.
John O'Lance.
All
Yeah.
right.
I just want to go on the record to
of-
say that I'm very hungover and I wasn't expecting to be testing my memory right this second. So I apologize to the Force fans that I'm not the best representative right this second, okay?
So I think some names of potential players out of that first ever Western Force team that is of note that you may not be aware of, or that will be of note for you. We had Brendan Cannon at hooker. We had
course,
Scott
yeah.
Farber at number 8, and Digby Ioane in on the wing.
Oh my God, I forgot Digby played for the Force.
Yeah. So I'm
How
sure there's
good.
lots of Force
How
fans at
good.
home screaming at us saying, this would have been so easy. How could you not know this? But anyway, a little bit of fun.
That genuinely is one of the things that I really, really rate about the Force fan base, is how passionate they are. So please feel free to get in touch and tell us how quickly you were able to rattle through the 15 and whether or not you were able to even get the bench as well. That'd be incredible. Now, what we're going to be doing is moving on to the preview of the Western Force. Mitch, you'll be taking us through this. For those of you who are listening on a podcast, we also are putting up a bunch of images to go alongside this. So you can go onto YouTube and search for Pick and Drive Rugby, and you'll be able to watch the images and the tables and the like that we have to support our talk now. But Mitch, I'll hand it over to you. As we mentioned at the start of the year, we were going to be bringing in some new segments and some new opportunities to hear more about rugby from around Australia. And for that, we have Lockie from Scrumbags here with us. Lockie, how are you?
Good, boys. Nice to be here. How are we all?
Very well, thanks, mate. Now, this segment is called All Abroad, and it is a wonderful opportunity in this current episode, or this current first edition of it, to hear about the actions of Australian rugby players, both men and women, across competitions throughout the world. Importantly, though, Lockie, you've got something pretty exciting that's just happened within your life in terms of rugby. Why don't you quickly run us through that and what it might mean for your coverage of the game within Australia?
Yeah, thanks, Ando. Look, I've been really fortunate enough to jump on board with RA full-time. So in my previous work as a sports journalist, I had a little bit to do covering community rugby, and it's started to pay off dividends. So I've jumped on board with them to cover community rugby in smaller states. So really finding stories across Northern Territory, South Australia and Tasmania, and really pushing that forward into mainstream media and trying to get a bit more coverage in areas that don't typically have a lot of rugby push in the press. So I'm really excited that I've jumped on board doing that, and obviously helps inform what I do for fun anyway, which is just read a lot about rugby.
and put up many well-made social media posts about the Australians
you flatter
performing
me.
all over the globe as well. Mate, we have just lost Mitch, but we'll keep going with what we're doing anyway. One of the things I wanted to ask, so you spoke about maybe covering areas of rugby from places in Australia that don't have as much media presence. So obviously I'm assuming you're not going to be doing much in New South Wales and Queensland. What states will you be working pretty closely with?
So by and large, it will just be Northern Territory, South Australia, and Tassie. And the reason for that is because they don't have a massive media presence in those states. There isn't a professional team either. So there's not a lot of reason for there to be rugby staff on pushing media full time. But ahead of what's going to be a pretty big decade, and that's pushed both through RA channels and in your bigger Sydney papers, Queensland papers, things like that, there is a lot of rugby coming to Australia. And we want to try and highlight those grassroots areas that might not usually get the limelight that they probably deserve. So areas like the Coopers Premiership in Adelaide, where they've got a massive competition there. It's growing every year. And in the Northern Territory, where they're currently playing, Tasmania, which is a growing area of footy as well. It's just about getting them put stories. And it's fun stuff to do anyway. It's stuff that I've done in the past as a journo, and now I get the chance to specifically focus on community rugby, which is super exciting because there's a million yarns to tell, and every clubhouse and every old codger at the bar has a story that's worth sharing.
Well, mate, can't wait to hear those old codger stories. Let's jump on into things with the Aussies abroad for the last week or so. Just so everybody knows, at the time of recording, it is currently Sunday night. It is a little bit difficult for us to do the full kind of European Champions Cup matches because some of them are playing in about 3 or 4 hours. So there will be some comments and some matches that we can't cover in full detail yet, but that simply is what it is. So Lockie, take it away, my friend.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll look at Champions Cup to start with because it's what many people consider the club envy of rugby at the moment. It's something that we're really missing in the Southern Hemisphere, that big draw card for club footy outside your major seasons. And there are plenty of Aussies in the mix anyway. So at the moment, we've had a few teams qualifying through, and I'll list out some names that might jog your memory that are playing in Europe at the moment. There's big names, Wallabies like Scotty Seo over at Exeter. Solomona Carter is also there as well. His old Brumbies teammate is over at the Chiefs now. You've got Ben Tapawai, the 2011 Red Centre winner for the Premiership over there in Suncorp. He plays with the Sharks out of Durban. So he's on the same team as Evan Etzbeth, Sia Khaleesi, a bunch of absolutely mammoth Springboks, and he's really holding together that midfield at the moment, which is unreal. Playing inside Lucanio Arm. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that as far as the pairing is concerned. Ridiculous. Looking over into Ireland, Leinster's stacked with most of the Irish team, but Sammy Carter, former Brumbies, former Wallaby lock, he's been running the ship at Ulster. He's still going. He's in his mid-30s. He's a bit long in the tooth, but he is the number one defensive line-out operator in the URC leading up to this point in the Champions Cup, and he's just been kicking goals. He's captained Ulster a few times as well, so it's really good to see him going. He's got them through to the round of 16 that they're currently in. Edinburgh has a couple of Edinburgh for the layman has a couple of Aussies floating around in there, but the main one to point out is a fella called Nick Haining, who plays in the back row for Scotland as well. But if you're a Force fan, you might remember him from, I'd say 2016, maybe even earlier, and he was running around as a back row and second row there. We've also got Big Willie Skelton over at La Rochelle getting into the mix. Richie Arnold, the twin brother of Rory Arnold, he's still trotting around at Toulouse, and they've made it through to the round of 16 as well. And we've got Ben Meehan, the halfback, Aussie halfback out of Gloucester, and they've made it through too. So plenty of people to keep an eye on. A few of the favourites, Aussie favourites, might pick a few Tars ears up here. Out of Northampton, James Ram and the Northampton guys, they just got kicked out, unfortunately. They've also got a couple of old Reds, Lucan Salakai-Loto and Angus Scott-Young in their team. They just bounced out. And a favourite of yours, I reckon, and Alex Newsom at Claremont. He's been doing really well at fullback, but unfortunately they just got bounced out in their final, their fourth round game of the Champions Cup. So lots of Aussies in action.
I saw from Hugh Tyndall on Twitter that Nobby Newsom maybe didn't have his best game within that match, but I love the man anyway.
Wasn't his best. He's had some really good ones that probably won't go down as his best, but plenty to look forward to for the French top 14 season ahead as well. And that puts us nicely into probably that sub-tier into the do that second level of the Champions Cup with the Challenger Cup. Thank you, which I won't get into, but it does point me to a man I'm really interested in talking about for Aussies abroad. And he's a fellow called John Porch. So if you've ever been watching the Seven Circuit, or you watched that big period sort of after the Rio Olympics and Com Games and Gold Coast, John Porch was a mainstay on the Aussie Sevens team. And he is currently about 2 years away from going full Mac Hansen and qualifying for Irish residency and Irish eligibility. He's racked up 70 caps for Connacht now in the URC and across their previous competitions. And the Irish media absolutely love him. Plays fullback, plays wing, really versatile player, super fit. He's still standing about 100 kegs as well, so he's a big body. And there is a real possibility that come 2025, we are facing an Irish team with Mac Hansen on one wing and John Porch on the other.
That would be hard to bear. But at the same time, I mean, just touching on the Mac Hansen situation for a moment, it's not like he wasn't getting opportunities in Australian rugby and wasn't being given a contract here either. He's chosen to make that path over there and use his eligibility for Irish rugby, and fair play to him. He wasn't able to break through within the Wallaby setup, but good on him for the growth that he's made over there. It's pretty remarkable.
Oh, it is absolutely. And, you know, hindsight is always 2020. So we could always laugh and talk about keeping these players. But at the end of the day, if they're going on and making it in Europe, it's fantastic to see. And I'm really, really glad for them. And they're not the only ones. It's not the man's game over there. And I've been keeping a real close eye on the Wallaroos. And some of our Super W players have been kicking goals, especially over in the Allianz Premier 15s, which is the English semi-pro competition over there. And you've had a couple of on the show. You've had M. Chancellor, who's now over there with Quins, with Arabella McKenzie and Caitlin Leaney. Exeter, they've got Laurie Kramer, Mackenzie Leonard, and they've also got Hayley Durara, who plays out in the Brumbies as well. So there's 6 currently running around. And unsurprisingly, Exeter are second on the ladder, and Quinn's a third. So the Aussies are putting in a really good shift over there.
Oh, good.
And
Grace Hamilton also got a gift as well, didn't she?
Yeah, she did. She's over at Montpellier now in the elite feminine Division 1. They're just about to have I think she's hopefully, and I didn't get confirmation of this, but they're playing in a couple of hours out in France. I didn't see a team list. I'm really hoping she's on it. But I sent her a quick message, and unfortunately, she's the only Aussie woman playing in France at the moment. So I hope she can carry the flag for us, have a good crack on debut for Montpellier, and get the most out of her 5-game stint over there. So he's hoping she makes a big impression.
He is hoping, definitely, and it's a great opportunity to see the women get to have an experience outside of Australian rugby, but also get more opportunity to play either within a professional or semi-professional setup, because the Super W season, as good as it is to watch and to support, is so short that they don't get enough games of high-quality rugby to really bring them up to the standard needed at the international level. So it's great for all of the players over there. And if you follow anyone like Michaela Leonard or Arabella McKenzie or Laurie Kramer on Instagram, their stories are fun. I think they're all the Aussies are just gravitating together and spending all their time together, going and getting coffees with girls, going for walks, enjoying the English countryside in the gloom and weather that it has. Great banter, great stories, and glad to see them kind of soaking up the opportunities that they're getting over there.
Yeah, what an experience as well. And the best thing about it as well is that we're at a stage where you can't just have your Super W. You've also got these opportunities in Europe. You've got these opportunities over in New Zealand, which we'll touch on in a tick, but it puts the blowtorch back on Australian rugby to keep these women in the game. You're getting opportunities. You're getting a taste of the pro game. We need it here. It's never been more important for us to get that in Australia. And it leads me nicely into our 2 girls who are over in New Zealand at the moment. A friend of the pod, Sarah Naigama, she's over there with Matatu. And so is Georgia Cormick, the Rebel scrum half. So we've just seen them do their media day. They're getting into training at the moment, and I'm really keen. So we'll have to jump on the Matatu bandwagon and make sure we're cheering for them when Super Rugby Aupiki kicks off in, just under a month.
Very exciting. So much good rugby coming up, and so great to hear about the players that are lighting things up. A couple of highlights from some of the player performances over the last week or two. Go back and watch Ben Meehan's 50-22 or 50-20. 50-22 attempt when he was playing recently. Who's he play for again? Ben Meehan is...
He plays for Gloucester.
Yep. It is one of the best 50-22s that you will ever see. So well into his own half and drills it up near the opposition try line. And Marika Korombete, I know we haven't mentioned him yet, but he's over in the top league, or Japan League One, I should say. Sorry, Japan League One. And he has produced one of the best wingers tries that you will ever see. Picking the ball up from the ruck, bursting through into a gap, and then doing an awesome flying touchdown in the corner with his whole body out of the field of play. And wonderful try. So great to see him.
He's just a monster. He did it again this weekend. The Wild Knights, Saitama Wild Knights, had a game against Black Rams, who've got a couple of Aussies as well, like Isaac Lucas. But Marika just scores tries for fun. Did it again, bumping off people, picks and drives. He is unstoppable at the moment. And unsurprisingly, Wild Knights with Marika and Robbie Dean still as coach, they are top of the table, 5-0. So if you want a Japanese team to support successfully, jump on the Saitama bandwagon. The other one that there's a lot of interest in, there's heaps and heaps of Japanese players. If you want to have a look at the main Wallabies that are over there, please go check out Scrumbags. It's pinned, and have a look at everyone that's down there. But Kintetsu Liners with Will Genia and Quade Cooper when he's playing and not injured, this is their first year in the top division, and they are in struggle street at the moment. So they're 0-4.
Really?
They've had a real tough start to the season. Willie Genia doing his best. He had a great battle against Faf de Klerk against the Cannon Eagles.
I saw that.
So there's brilliant halfbacks running around, but unfortunately, they're really struggling. Bernard Foley, however, is doing terrifically. He's doing what he does best and just kicking goals. He's got the Spears up to second. They're undefeated as well. They've only had I think 3 wins and a draw, so they're doing very well to the start of the season. And just plenty more to come. I love watching Japanese rugby, and it's a real shame that it's not on Stan at the moment.
Well, how good, mate. I think we'll finish things up there. That was a very comprehensive overview of the Aussies abroad. Thank you for the first installation of what will be a semi-regular part of the podcast. So thanks again for your time, mate, and can't wait to see the yarns and the stories that will come out of your new role at RA, covering Australian rugby all across the states where more of a voice is needed. Thank you.
Mate, absolute pleasure. Thank you very much, and keen to catch up for a beer at the Sevens.
Keen, mate. Catch you there. Bye.
Fantastic. So this is, we said at the start, and if you haven't read the title of the podcast, we are talking about the Western Force today. So let's start off with sort of a recap of the 2022 season. So the Western Force finished in 9th place. They got 4 wins and 10 losses in 2022. Overall, a bit of a mixed season. Simon, I'll throw to you first. What were your sort of initial, I guess, how would you score the performance of the Western Force from 2022?
I don't know. It's been a tough one. Obviously, we just went through the team for their first year back in Super Rugby, and every year it's kind of felt similar, a bit of slap together and a Band-Aid to kind of keep everything going. So, I'd probably maybe 6 out of 10, 5 or 6. We beat a Kiwi team, which I'm happy with. We nearly made the finals, and we don't really have any Wallabies in the side. So yeah, I'd probably say maybe a 6 out of 10. We're building some young talent coming through, which has been really good to see. Yeah.
And I think, and we will sort of talk about it in a little bit as we get on into our review and our preview for 2023. But I think overall, had the Western Force been able to pick up a few of the wins earlier in the season when we were playing just the Australian sides and we didn't have that crossover, they might have been able to sort of scrape into 8th place. They did finish on the same points on terms of table for win points as the Highlanders, who did finish 8th above them, and they did scrape into the playoffs from a better for and against. So it would have come down to just a few games had they been able to get across the line that they might have actually been able to scrape in. So, Ando, what were the key games that you sort of think of when you think of Western Force in 2022?
Look, I think the first and the last game. It's fairly simple. The first game against the Brumbies was an absolutely pulsating match, and the Brumbies the Force played really, really well, taking the points on offer. Ian Pryor had his kicking boots on for a large part of the start of the season, at least. and they really ran the Brumbies close. They're actually winning 23-22 in the last 3 minutes of the game.
Yeah, 77th
but
minute.
Unfortunately for them, there was a last-minute try to Lockie Lonergan. Yeah, 77th. So Lockie Lonergan scored a try in like the 79th minute, and then a conversion made it 29-23. But what it showed is the doggedness of the Force, particularly within their forward game, and their ability to, I don't mean this in a bad way, but to negate the other Aussie teams trying to play the style of game that they wanted to play. But they just weren't able to keep up with, particularly the New Zealand teams. They got blown out of the water. So their final game against the Hurricanes, final match of the season, they ended up winning 27-22. And that was just huge because it was a swan song for a large number of long-time Brumby Force players. And so it was just great for them to have that opportunity to farewell them and help them go off on a winning note. Players who'd given so much to the club, like Richard Kahui, Fergus Warner had already left, Jeremy Thrush, Andrew Reddy, Greg Holmes, etc. Saying goodbye.
Yeah, look, we do have a list coming up next of ins and outs, so you don't have to run through the whole list. And I will give you a warning there, Andrew. If you say Brumbies,
that's okay.
If you say Brumbies once more on this pod, I will remove you from the stream. So just a warning there, mate.
Now,
Simon,
chat, mate. Have fun.
Simon, the Western Force did announce sort of early in the season, around March, that Tim Sampson wasn't going to be renewed for his contract and would finish up at the end of the season. That's a massive announcement to make for any team, particularly so early on in the season, when you're only sort of like 3 or 4 weeks into the new comp. What effect do you think this had on the overall performance of the Western Force in 2022?
Yeah, it was a bit of a strange one, wasn't it? If they were planning to move on from him, I don't think it really added any benefit to say it so early in the season, and let everyone know that, we've replaced you. I'm not sure. I mean, the Force started kind of okay, but I do recall straight after that announcement that they kind of had a couple of floppy games, I think.
Yeah.
We had the Crusaders smashed us 53-15, the Highlanders 61-10, the Chiefs 54-21. But obviously, as you said, we came back towards the end, but I'm not too sure exactly what was going on in the camp. But it just doesn't seem like a bright idea to, put that out there so early.
Make that decision. And I guess you can sort of see that the players were definitely playing for Sampson in that final performance.
Yeah.
That game over the Hurricanes was good. Like, it was a very good performance by the Western Force, and probably their best all year. We've highlighted it as our best performance of the season. One of the things, and I'll throw this question to you, that season opener against the Brumbies, and I've now said that forbidden name, but that season opener, the Western Force played very wide and very expansive. They threw the ball around a lot. Their backs were finding a lot of space. That's not something that we saw replicated much more throughout 2022. What do you think might have been the reasons why they started to be a bit more conservative?
I think partly it's because it's what the fear of losing can do to teams, is that players second guess themselves and are not willing to take as many half chances as they have before. So players will conservatively, instead of looking for that push pass or backing themselves with a piece of skill, they'll be more willing to take a hit up and try and recycle the ball for the next play. I think it's just the pressure that losing places upon a team, especially when the Force were playing back at home. COVID was less of a concern or less of an impact upon their season. And so they had more of an opportunity to play in front of a home crowd. I just think that when you combine all those things together with a fairly young and inexperienced squad as well at the time, it was a challenging situation to find themselves in.
So I'm sorry, Simon, you about to say something?
Oh, no, I was just agreeing. I mean, I think the Force have kind of had two groups of players, ones that are just coming into the scene and ones that are just on their way out. And I think, you're probably going to find this inconsistency when you're looking at players who are young and are still getting used to Super Rugby or gelling with the team. And I think if you have these players who are, I guess, the journeymen, as they've always been described, they're probably going to be a bit inconsistent because they can't quite put in the same performance every week. So would probably suggest that was something to do with it. I'm not too sure.
That leads us nicely into our next slide. So we'll run through the squad for 2023, and then we'll talk about the ins and the outs, or the signings and the departures. So the overall squad, in the forwards for the props, we've got Agnes Wagner, Bo Abra, Charlie Hancock, Santiago Medrano, Tom Robertson, Sio Sifa Amone, and Andrew Romano. Ando, why don't you run us through the hookers and the locks?
So, hookers, Feliti Kaitu'u, Falaufa Inga'a, and Jack Winchester. The locks are Felix Kalapu, Isaac Rodder, Jeremy Williams, Ryan McCauley, and Will Sankey.
And then
I assume that's me on the back row.
Oh, yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
no,
you
sorry.
go through the back row. I thought
I don't know. I thought we'd take a turns.
No, you go for it, mate. I thought you jumped out of your seat for a
We've
second.
got Jason Pugh, Ken Kateka, Michael Wells, Ollie Callan, Tim Anstey, and Ned Slacksmith.
All right. Now, looking at this forward pack, who are the names that jump out to you? Who
Simmo,
are
you
you
go
really
first.
excited to see wear that blue, that Western Force blue in 2023?
I'll tell you who I'm not excited to see is Falau Fainga'a. I saw that you had that put down as a biggest gain. Is that meant to be biggest gain for the Brumbies getting rid of him, or just a little bit confused about that one? No, I'm excited to see Tim Anstey coming in again. I think his transition to sevens from sevens to the 15s game has been quite strong, and I think he's been building consistently every year. So I'm excited to see how he goes. Jackson Pugh, obviously he was over at the Bunnings NPC playing for Auckland and playing number 8 for them quite consistently and having some really good game time over there. And there's been a little bit of media about his time over there and how he's expecting to come in. Obviously, with our front row, Santiago Medrano and Tom Robertson, always exciting. And it'll be interesting to see what happens this year with Feliti Kaitu'u because, obviously he kind of shot to a little bit of stardom when he initially came onto the scene and was selected in Rennie's squad. I believe he was holding on to a little bit of an injury last year, so that's why his game time was a bit inconsistent. So I would love to see a really good year from him. Obviously, with the Wallabies, the hooker position is still somewhat open. I mean, obviously, Pareki is the incumbent, but they're a new coach in town, and so we could see a few players that we aren't expecting to get promoted up to the national team. So
now, Simon, 2022, the captain was Feliti Kaitu'u. Under, I guess, what we assume at the moment that Falaufa Inga'a possibly comes in. Don't want to say he's more favoured than Kaitu'u, but he's one of the starting hookers for the Wallabies. So you'd think he might get the nod over Kaitu'u to start, particularly his first few rounds. Who are we thinking in terms of leadership might take that captain's armband in 2023?
It'd be interesting to see what happens with it. Obviously, reflective with the Wallabies, it's a new coaching setup, new coach coming in, and as a result, some things are going to change. I'd really like to see the Western Force start kind of looking towards the future. Obviously, with Michael Wells coming in, he was the Rebels captain last year, was he not?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I mean, we do have some experience coming in, but I wouldn't want to see Michael Wells, receive it because obviously, he's kind of on the way out. So I would like to see someone younger, maybe a Tim Anstey, or
Isaac Rodder.
Yeah, so of course, Isaac Rodder, I think would be a really good fit for that as well. Definitely the players who are going to be 80-minute players, as we said with the Wallabies. So there's a couple. Would be interesting to see what they do.
Fantastic. Well, let's move through the back line for 2023. And there's some names in here that really do excite me. And that's one team in Australian Super Rugby that I'm really looking forward to see play is the Force back. So scrum halves, we've got Ian Pryor, Isaac Fines, Lely Owasa, and Henry Robertson. In the fly halves, we've got Rejan Pasatoa, Hamish Stewart, and Bryce Hegarty. Simmo, I'll get you to finish off and the centers and the outside backs.
Sweet.
So
Bailey Kunzel, Grayson Makara. No, you do the outsides. Bailey Kunzel, Grayson Makara, George Pullman, and Oliver Cummins. Over to you.
Chase Tiatia for outside backs, Daniel Allah, Jake Strawn, Manasa Mataeli, Tony Pulu, Reece Depine, and Rupeni Mataeli, who I believe is the younger brother of Manasa.
How good's that? Getting to Fijian international players. Well, I mean, I don't know if Rupini's an international player yet, but he's got that potential. Playing for the Western Force, that's only going to do good things. Now, there's a lot of firepower in this back row. There is a lot of names there that will struggle to get minutes. Who are we thinking is potentially going to start in that first round one in the number 10 jersey?
Well, Richard Passato is still injured, so it won't be him. So that one is a pretty obvious shout. I think from there, you have to ask the question of whether they'll move Bailey Kunzel in 1 to 10. He's played there for the Brumbies, deputising when Noah Lewisiu was injured, and he actually did quite a good shift there during Super Rugby AU, I believe it was. So they could look at moving Bailey Kunzel in. That would move Hamish Stewart maybe out to 12, considering Hamish played there for the Reds for a very long time. But at the same time, Hamish Stewart does have a background at playing 10. So I personally would love to see Hamish Stewart at 10. I think that'd be great. And then Bailey Kunzel stays at 12 with somebody like maybe a George Pullman or another outside back that has, another inside back that's come over is, who is it? Spinks?
Sam Spink.
Well? He's come over from Wasps. Yeah. I'd love to see him maybe give an option because he's meant to have some good shouts coming from Wasps over in the Premiership.
Yeah, he was an England under-20s centre, and he's been signed on a 2-year deal. So, it's not one of those little band-aids where he's in for one season. So hopefully there is an opportunity to build upon that.
Yep. Simon, what do you think for outside backs? Who do you think are going to be the starting outside backs?
Well, there's a number of options they could go with. It could be very easily Manasa Martelli on one wing, Chase Tiatia on the other, and then they could go Jake Strawn because, although he didn't light the world on fire last season, I think Strawn did absolutely nothing wrong and was quite consistently consistent at doing the right thing. So that would probably be my bet. I mean, I don't know Rupeni Martelli, so he could be an absolute gun, and we could just have Martellis on both wings and then Tiatia at the back. But I think it's quite exciting. Obviously, Tony Pulu did make the Wallabies shortlist last year on some good form, but then I think he got injured towards the end. So he was playing quite well last year as well. The back line is actually quite exciting, and we really don't know exactly what's going to happen. You could see, going back to the fly-off position, but Bryce Hegarty was playing 10 quite a bit when James O'Connor was injured with Hamish Stewart at 12. So they do already have, I guess, a bit of cohesion and familiarity. And obviously Hamish Stewart has been playing 12 for years at the Reds, and he was playing 12 for the Aussie A's as well, wasn't he?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so there are some options that could go around. You essentially have 4 people who could play 10. My guess is as good as yours. Yeah.
I was going to say that's one thing about this Force squad this year, and that that's one thing that came out of my chat with Isaac Rodder, was that there is such a competition for spots, which is such a great thing for such a young squad. And what it means is, and what he was saying in preseason up to that point already, that both Hamish Stewart, Bryce Hegarty, some of the other players, they were all swapping in and out and playing centre, playing wing, playing fullback. Like Bryce Hegarty can really play other than maybe 9, and he could at a pinch, could play anywhere in that back line quite convincingly. So you have options there, which is really exciting. And while some of the names on here are up and coming players, which may not start to sort of become household names for another season or two, they're surrounded by players like Chase Tiatia and Tony Pulu, which will give them that experience. And this is probably the hallmark of this year, is that there's a new coach coming in, Simon Cron. Most likely will bring a different style of play than what the Western Force played last year under Sampson. Who knows exactly what that is at this stage? We haven't seen anything from them. They did play 1 or 2 Japanese games at the end of last year, but really, did Cron have a whole lot of say over that? That's
and they weren't televised either, so we can't even see how the players matched up or the positioning. It was really frustrating.
That's right. So when this backline does get some of that cohesive element and we can get some of those combinations together and to start to know how each other play, like the back end of Super Rugby this year, I expect big things from the Force because I think once these guys start firing, they're going to be really hard to stop.
Yeah, absolutely. I think
Yeah.
once they build some combinations and put everything together, it's going to be a very exciting team. And I think throughout the squad, there are a lot of good players from 1 to 15 and actually a bit of depth this year. And as you said, a lot of people who are actually up and coming. So we could see some future stars being born for the 27 World Cup.
Well, let's keep moving along then, and we'll go into our let me go through. So our signings and our departures. Now, I do apologize if this font is a little bit hard to read. There's just so many names on both lists. So I'll run us through the signing. So the biggest one is Simon Cron's coming in as the coach. Again, as we said in the last slide, still to be seen which sort of style of play he wants for his Western Force team, but from the time that he's had in Japan. I think he was with Verblitz under Steve Hansen. So what the learnings that he take from that experience and bring back to Super Rugby. We know he was the forwards coach for the New South Wales Waratahs for a number of years as well. So he does know some of these players. He does know the Australian system. It's a good signing in my books for what we can expect a coach to come in and have a big impact. So I'll run through this. We've got Chase Tiatia, Bryce Hegarty, Henry Robertson, Folau Fainga'a, Jeremy Williams, which technically he did come in and play some minutes last year for the Force, but he was a mid-season. Mid-season signing. I've just muted you there, Ando. All good. Michael Wells coming across from the Rebels. Sifa Amone, George Pullman, Andrew Romano, Rupene Matayeli, Ned Slack-Smith, Felix Kalapu, Charlie Hancock, Jackson Pugh, Oliver Cummings, and Sam Spink. Now, before we get into the departures, Simon, which of the names on that list are you most excited about?
Well, I think Chase Tiatia is obviously quite an electric player, and him coming into the team will obviously bolster the outside backs. I'd probably say Sam Spink because I don't really know that much about him. And under 20s centre for England, he's on a 2-year deal, so there is an opportunity for a little bit of continuity from this year to the next year. And other than kind of the inside centre position, we haven't really got an outside centre. So if he could potentially take that position, that would be really exciting to see. Other than that, I'd say, Simon Cron. I'm very excited to see what he does with the team.
And anyone here that you're really looking forward to seeing play in the Western Force Blue?
Look, I am just going to say that massive crash bang was my dog falling off the couch into the sliding doors behind me. So well done. He was asleep and just took a stack when he rolled over. So good. Good chat. And then he let rip as he did that. So it's horrible in here.
Lovely.
So
fantastic.
The players that I am incredibly excited to see is, like was mentioned before, Chase Tiatia. He, for me, is somebody who would be really, really exciting as a starting 15. I think that's one of the things that the Force have lacked in the last couple of years is a consistent 15. I thought Jake Strawn did decently when he got some consistent minutes within that position, but he's not a game breaker. He's a decent finisher, got a decent boot on him as well, but he's not someone that's going to change the complexion of a match or win a game for you off his own brilliance. Whereas we saw a lot of that with Chase Tiatia last season, so it's very, very exciting that he's made that move. And also, I'm interested to see how Michael Wells goes. I'm not sure of the amount of time that he's going to get, but I mean, the Force have lost Brendan Stando, who was one of the key number 8s for the last couple of years for them. So I wonder if Wells is going to be that experienced workhorse replacement for Brendan Stando.
Well, 2 players that I'm really looking forward to seeing play and potentially from a Wallabies perspective. So Folau Fainga'a. Now, I know, Simon, you're a bit grin through gritted teeth when we say that name, but I think a move is good for Folau. I think he does have talent. He does have immense potential. He has got himself into that sort of backup hooking spot for the Wallabies this year and throws a few dodgy lineouts and potentially costs us a few games. But realistically, I think moving away from the setup, the Brumbies, where he's been for a few years, moving out west, it's only going to do good for him. Having a new set of coaches, a new bunch of teammates around him, and sort of new beaches in West Australia and Perth and that sort of thing. So it'll be great to see if he can really sort of harness this change and channel that and have a really strong Super Rugby season to kind of put his name back into the Wallabies books and see if he can get himself back up there and have a good impact. The other name I'm really excited about is Bryce Hegarty. Now, he is getting on and he is a bit of an older player, but one of the things about Bryce Hegarty, and I mean this as a compliment and I don't mean this as an insult, but in some ways he's a bit of a poor man's Reece Hodge in that he's the kind of player, maybe he's not going to kick you a penalty from halfway and win you a game, but he's going to be able to play consistently anywhere in that back line. And when injuries start to come mid-season or late in the season, he's experienced, he's played with the Waratahs, he's played with the Reds, he's played over for Leicester or Leinster, I can't remember which one it was, in the English Premiership. So he's a player that's really going to have a good impact on the players around him, particularly some of the younger players who are coming in and this is their first crack at Super Rugby, or they're still sort of learning to trust in the players around them. So having his experience there is going to be really, really good, and I think is going to sort of lift that back line around him. I'm also really keen to see, just shooting through the name, I can't see it now. Is it on there? Hamish Stewart? We got that.
We've got Hamish Stewart.
Is that not listed on there?
Stewart is not listed on there, but
how strange. Now, I will admit, I did copy these straight from the RA website, so do better there, fellas. Anyway, no, Hamish Stewart's another player that I'm looking forward to seeing for the Western Force this year. I think he's a player that has sort of been on the peripheral of the Wallaby squad for a few years now. And whether that comes down to just combinations and not having that exposure to be able to play with some of the Wallabies players that are getting picked, if he has a really big season for the Force and can put himself into good contention, particularly as a fly half, I think he might be able to crack the squad. Maybe not this year, but maybe in the next few years, which is really good. Let's go through the departures. Ando, do you want to quickly run through those for us?
Yeah, sweet. Greg Holmes, Jeremy Thrush, Richard Kahui, Brendan Stander, Carl Godwin, Fergus Lee Warner, Andrew Reddy, Brad Lacey, Byron Ralston, Jack McGregor, Jake McIntyre, Michael McDonald, Sidaleki Tamani, Harry Lloyd, Jackson Pugh.
Now, the thing that really jumps out to me in this list is just the amount of experience that the Force are losing with these players. Now, they're not necessarily world-class international players at the peak anymore. Some of these players will be retiring. Some of these players will be going off for that last paycheck in Japan. But the amount of Super Rugby experience or international, depending on which one they are, is going to be a massive out for the Western Force. Simon, when you read through this list, does it sort of make you a little bit sort of just wish that maybe you could have kept one or two of these players for another season just to sort of keep that cohesion across the coming season?
Well, I think you guys already know if there was one player that I wish the Force had held onto, it would have been Fergus Lee Warner, who was an absolute weapon last year and the year before that. I think I'll probably be echoing every Force fan when I say he definitely deserved to look in at the Wallabies. So, good riddance, Reddy. No, I love Reddy. But yeah, Fergus Lee Warner is going to definitely be a big hole in the Force. I would definitely put him down as what I would nominate for captain. When you asked me earlier who I would have suggested as captain, I would have put him through for that one.
Yeah, that's a good shout.
Obviously he's gone. I do just want to comment real quick on your departures. You have Jackson Pugh as departures, but you also have Jackson Pugh as signings. He is signed for this year.
Again, I'll throw that to RA, but that could just be my dodgy copy paste job there. So who knows what?
Yeah, it probably is. He's definitely on their team sheet.
Yeah. Godwin as well is a big loss. He was, I guess, our only international back, besides Martelli last year as well, and wealth of experience. And he was captaining the side as well when Kaitu was carrying that injury for a while. So, that is another quite large loss. I believe Jeremy Thrush has moved into the forwards coaching role. So he's still around the force.
He was coaching with the Super W, I think, or the juniors. He's around in some coaching.
I'm not sure. Yeah, he's in
Yeah.
some. He's not quite lost to West Australian rugby, so he's still involved in a way. And obviously, Richard Kahui is the biggest loss because who are thirsty mums going to look at now?
Yeah.
Or
Ando's
thirsty
like
dads.
still crying.
Yeah, that's
Still
true.
crying,
Yeah.
Now I'm going to
let's
put
be
my
real.
my Waratahs hat on here, and I don't think we can get through a pod without doing that. And one player that I'm really disappointed to see leave the Western Force is Andrew Reddy, and purely from a Waratahs perspective, if there's one player that you can expect to come on and give away a dumb red card, he's that player. So it's unfortunate that we now don't have that kind of red hot magnet that we can just go to and
If I may interrupt real
whispers.
quick, we got rid of Andrew Reddy, who is a hooker who does something dumb, and we replaced him with Flower Fanga'a, who is a hooker who loves to do dumb things. So don't worry, there'll be some neck rolls out there. No, but I do say it in jest. I do believe Fanga'a is a good signing, but he is just prone to a brain fart at times. And so I really do hope that what you're saying will occur, that he can kind of just get a new environment, and it might do some good for him.
Ando, anyone that's really jumping out to you as a big loss for the Force?
I think Fergus Lee Warner earlier in the season was the massive loss. He was definitely pushing for Wallaby selection, or at least to be in the Wallaby squad. And he was far and away the best forward within that team, hands down, absolutely no doubt about it. And his move to England has gone pretty poorly because he went to Worcester, who have gone into administration and have now been kicked out, and he's now had to move to Bath on what was probably a cut price deal because he just needed to take any job over there as what he could do. So, look, I think that he will be a massive loss. And also, I'm kind of disappointed that Byron Ralston's gone as well, because I always rated him. I thought he was a really exciting outside back. So for him to be going over to Connacht, I'm pretty worried that this is going to be another situation where a decent Australian outside back goes over to Ireland, goes through their development system, and then either finds an Irish grandparent somehow, or waits a few years until he's eligible. So,
well, he's already, like, he signed knowing that he was eligible, right? Like, I think
didn't he? Yeah,
that was known. So, he was a player that I was highlighting too. Like, for the Wallabies and for Rugby Australia, specifically, like the wider Australian rugby, he's a player that had great potential and would have done good things if we were able to keep him. I hope he's not another Mac Hansen that goes over there and ends up like having a cracking season, gets selected, and is now potentially going to play a World Cup against Australia.
Yeah, honestly, there's a lot of players in that departure list that I could go through one by one and say, that is a lot of experience and a lot of young, exciting talent. I think Jack McGregor as well is another one who's an exciting young outside back. And I think he played a little bit of 10 at times. There's a lot of exciting young people who have left, and then a lot of old heads as well that have left. So.
I just want to highlight for those people out there who just continually say online in forums and chat rooms and whatever that Australian rugby doesn't have the depth for 5 Super Rugby teams. Look at this. We definitely have the depth. We may not have the coin to keep these players, but there's so many players on this list who, if we could keep, would do massive things for Australian rugby. So I don't buy that it's a depth issue. I think it's more of a affordability issue. All right, let's keep moving on. So let's go into our most valuable players, or our MVPs for 2023. Now, Simon, you're the resident Western Force fan. Who are you going to highlight as the most valuable player for your season this year?
I'd probably say for me, Isaac Rodder. He's probably the only one that we fully expect to make it into the Wallaby squad. Besides Flower Fanga'a as well. But Rodder is just very reliable. He plays 80 minutes. He's a workhorse. He runs the line out. He carries well. He has really good ruck attendance. He's really just going to be the engine room for the Western Force, and I think he's going to do a lot of work that goes unsung. But don't worry, Rodder. I see you. I recognize you. We love you.
Ando?
I would have said Isaac Rodder as well, but just to provide something different. I think that Matayeli continues to be the game breaker for the Force in 2023. He was their point of difference last year, and he is the player who can create something from nothing, put in a big hit, beat a couple of players on the way to the line. He is just somebody who provides that strike power out wide that the team had been missing previously. So in the forwards, Isaac Rodder, without a shadow of a doubt, brings that experience and grunt needed. But from the backs, it's Manasa Matayeli in terms of his sheer capacity to score tries.
Yeah, so the other two players, for those that are listening on the podcast, we've highlighted here, we've got Hamish Stewart and Isaac Fines Leliawasa. Now, with Isaac Fines, how long is he out for with that injury? Like, when is he expected back?
I'm not
Anyone
sure.
know?
We'd have to ask the Draft Rugby boys for their injury ward update about that one.
Okay, all good. Well, when he gets back, we know he's electric on the field, and he's another player that's got like unlimited potential. So, again, hoping to get him back on the field as soon as possible. I've put Hamish Stewart in here as well. I'll throw back to you, Simon, in a sec. I just want to say I've thrown Hamish Stewart in here as well because I think as a player we haven't seen the best of Hamish Stewart in Australian rugby, and again another player like Falau Fainga'a, if he's made the move west, hopefully it's going to give him a refresh, give him a bit more freedom. Allow him to play in that 10 spot that he wasn't necessarily allowed to play at Queensland. And if he can have a big season, he could end up pushing himself as another option for that fly half position for the Wallabies in the next few years. So a lot to expect from him this season. What were you about to say, Simon?
I was going to say with Isaac Fines, it'll be very interesting to see how it works with Simon Cron. The Western Force were kind of echoing the Wallabies by having that more electric 9 coming on towards the end that they were using Tate McDermott to do. That kind of, once the game opens up, can really challenge and snipe. So it'll be really interesting. Ian Pryor, I think, awesome, lovely guy, but I think he's starting to get a little bit slower from his ruck to ruck. So I would expect Isaac Fines to be starting to cement the number 9 starting role this year.
Fantastic. Anything else on these most valuable players before we move to our predictions for the season?
Nope, I'm good.
Let's go. No questions. Cool. So our season predictions for the Western Force in 2023. Now, we'll go through the strengths that we can highlight, the weaknesses that we might be able to identify, and then where we think they'll finish. Simon, no doubt, thinks that they'll finish first. So we'll go to you first, Simon. What do you think in terms of strengths? What are you highlighting as a strength for the Western Force this season?
I'd say a good point of strength is obviously the added depth. I'd say the back row is actually something that's very exciting. I pointed to it before, but Jackson Pugh, Ken Kateka, Michael Wells, Ollie Callan, Tim Anstey, these are all players who have shown that they get quite capable. I think the Western Force, we are always tenacious. It's just in our nature. And I'm really hoping that we can utilize some of the new talent coming in and really click quickly. And I'm excited to see what happens with Simon Cron and the way he wants to play, the way he wants to attack. Obviously, everything we're saying right now is very speculative. We really don't know what position people are going to be in. We really don't know what style of play they're going to be putting together. But I'm liking that they are starting to put a little bit more into the and develop for the future after a few years of kind of having a few journeymen coming in just as a band-aid whilst they're trying to reestablish themselves. Another thing I'm really excited about is the fact that they seem to be working the academy, and there was a few academy people who've gotten through. So hopefully we can continue to develop talent here, because that's what we want. We want locally grown talent.
Fantastic. Ando, what are your thoughts around some strengths for the Western Force?
Yeah, look, I think that a lot of the players they've brought in are really good quality, particularly some of the more experienced ones like your Hegarty, Fainga'a, Hamish Stewart. They are all good players. Chase Titia as well. They, in their own ways, are really good players. And that strength is also, unfortunately, a negative. And what it actually shows is the huge amount of turnover that there has been between 2022 and 2023. And if I was a kind of like a diehard Force fan, I'd be really concerned about that, because it's showing that we're not able to have that core level of continuity between seasons with large amounts of outs and ins. And do you mind if I just jump onto a weakness that comes from that?
Yep.
Cool. So when you actually go into the, if you actually go into the experience of their props, you have basically outside of Madrano, Robertson, and Kaitu as the hooker, and Fainga'a, you have 29,000 caps, Super Rugby caps, for the other available props and hookers. So if you have an injury to one of your starting props or your starting hooker, it means that you're having an uncapped player or an incredibly a very raw player coming onto the bench as a result of that. And so I just think that over the course of a long and pretty brutal Super Rugby season, the Force are going to struggle with their front three. And that might be a place where they come undone against some of the stronger scrummaging teams.
Well, I'll say their depth in centres is one thing that I'm really excited about, and we spoke about it earlier, just when we went through the squad. The amount of talent they have listed on paper for those positions, and there's only two of them on the field, two centres. So they have the ability to swap and change and to change combinations and to bring in players that will change the way they play their game, which is, I think, is a really positive thing to move forward. One thing that Simon Cron might need to start doing, like you said, Ando, is get some of those experienced centres to start packing down at tight head or loose head and pushing the scrum and giving impact there to sort of balance out the inexperienced front row with the experienced back line.
Maybe just for that, but either way, it's going to be a challenge, and I'm looking forward to seeing how they come up against it. If they can keep the core of this team together for the next couple of seasons, they're going to be really good. But the question is whether or not people will be willing to stay on beyond a one-season deal. We know with Flower Fainga'a, he's gone at the end of the season. He's off to Clermont. And so I actually personally don't think he should be getting much game time at all as a starter. If Kaitu is fit, you start Kaitu, because he's going to be the one that you're going to be able to build a front row around moving forward.
Yeah. And so one of the other things that I'm interested to see is we've got a new coach. We don't know what that best 23 or even that best 15 at the moment looks like for the Force. And that's one thing that I think will be a bit of a weakness for this team in 2023, is that they're going to be taking so many risks or opportunities to test combinations throughout the season. And Super Rugby, as we've spoken about previously, it's a sprint. It's not a marathon. You can't afford to miss a game. You drop one or two games like last season, and you're already out of the running for the finals. So if they aren't able to lock down their center combinations or their outside backs, the starting ones that they know that they can trust on and rely on quickly in the season, and they have to continue to change and chop and to sort of see who's going to fit the new way that Simon Cron is going to play his game in 2023, that they may be a bit of a work in progress this season and may not start to bear fruit from that until 2024 or 2025. What are your thoughts around that, Simon?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with what you're saying. I also, just think we haven't quite touched on Rajan Pasatoa being out for, I think, majority of the season, and he was looking really promising last year. So I think even whatever they do manage to build this year, what's going to happen next year when he's coming back into the fold? Hopefully they can stick a center combo together. But it is all up in the air. There's a lot of different 15s that we could put down for the Western Force that we could all argue for reasonably. So yeah, I'm just really excited to see. I think we've got a couple of trial games coming up soon. I'll be down on the hill at McGill-Gilvray Oval.
You've got the Reds, I think, coming over soon, right?
And then the Drua away, isn't it?
Yeah.
Or is it the Rebels playing the Drua?
The Rebels are playing the Drua. They play them next week, I think.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, so I'll give you guys a report then and let you know what kind of combinations they're putting together. I'm not sure if that game's going to be available to be streamed or anything, but it's really just kind of up in the air of what they're going to do. Obviously, with Rodder, like you said, he doesn't even apparently know who the 10's going to be, because everyone's been chopping and changing at training and all doing really well. But it's awesome to have competition for spots and having these people pushing each other to find the best form, which is really exciting.
And that's the other part of that. Having that competition for spots makes all of the players better because it pushes them. And you may have one or two players that have a lot of experience, like Mateli, and he can come in and he can teach some of those younger blokes who have raw talent and skill, but may not have the experience at this Super Rugby level. So he can, all of them, where they're constantly competing at training, it forces them to be the best they can be and make the better players even better because they know that there's a young bloke coming up behind them who is threatening to take over should they have one or two poor games. I'll start with you, Simon. Where do you see the Western Force finishing for Super Rugby this year?
There's a lot of factors, isn't there? I mean, we've got the Drua and Pacifica coming into their second season, and they would have developed quite well. So I'm really unsure. I mean, I think your prediction that you've got down 8th, that's pretty reasonable. But there's actually quite a lot of quality teams out there, and with such a big overturn in their players, we love to spout cohesion, and they're not going to have any cohesion.
Oh, he's dropped out.
Well, he's just cut off.
You take over.
I think what he's going to be saying is they're going to be on the cusp of that 8th or 9th spot, and it just depends how their players are going to be able to gel. And so my prediction is that they scrape into 8th and then get knocked out in the quarterfinal in the first round of the finals.
Apologies, I dropped out there.
You did. So Ando just jumped in over the top of you, but you keep going, Simon. You keep saying what you finished off what you were saying.
I don't even know where I was at. Yeah, a lot of overturn within the squad, so they're not going to have much cohesion. The people that you'd probably be expecting to be the bottom would be your Rebels, your Drua, Highlanders, Pacifica, and the Force. As to what order they are in and who's making the finals, it's really up in the air at the moment. I mean, I'm expecting some big seasons from some of the other teams. The Drua, obviously, I'm expecting some big things. Obviously, it's not a preview about the Drua, but I think this bottom kind of section of the teams, it's gonna be tough. I think it's gonna be a lot of clawing back and forth between teams, pushing themselves up and down.
And when I look at when I start to sort of name or write down the order that I think teams will finish on in 2023, that last 8th spot, there's like pretty much anyone could. We got the Force, as you said, Force, Rebels, Drua, Pacifica, Highlanders, like 5 or 6 teams that, depending on how they go throughout the season, will be fighting for that position for that playoff. It's going to be a really interesting season. It will. I personally think it'll come down to the draw and whether you can bag your home wins and not get pumped by too much and give away bonus points when you're playing away. And if the Force can do that, if they can get all of their wins at home or most of their wins at home and not give away any bonus points when they're away from home, I think they're going to do enough to drag to sneak into the finals in 8th place. Once they get into the quarterfinals, though, do they have the team to sort of play through and to get to that next round, to the semifinals? I'm not too sure. Again,
we could.
The whole thing is this season, new coach, they have the talent. They do have the talent. It comes down to injuries they pick up throughout the season and if they can gel in enough time to be a really cohesive unit and push those New Zealand teams. One thing that does excite me about Simon Cron, he is a Kiwi himself. He has just been over working with Steve Hansen, so he comes with knowledge of how the Kiwi setup is, what he needs to do to beat the Kiwis. Let's hope that he can have that impact on the Western Force and get them through to the quarterfinals this year. All right. Anything else that we wanted to say about the Western Force before we finish up our preview?
No, I'm done, my friend. I thought I'm really excited to see how they go this season. I'm not sure 2023 is going to be their season. I still think that these players need 12 months together in the competition to actually be able to compete against a lot of the top teams. So 2024, if they're able to keep their players together, their squad mostly together, will be an opportunity for them to really demonstrate or put together some consistent performances and wins both at home and away. So hopefully they have some good results this year whilst keeping the squad together for next year.
Yeah, I don't feel as hard on them as I think you do, Ando. I think they have talent on paper to put in some good performances. And I think playing back in Perth and getting the sea of blue, and I mean, Simon's going to be there at every home game screaming for them. So if that's not enough to get a team over the line, I don't know what is. And I'm just really excited to see players like Hamish Stewart, Falaufa and Ga'a, like put in big performances in 2023, push for Wallaby selection. And well, I mean, Vangar, who knows? He's off to Clermont next year, but he still has a World Cup where he can be picked. So if these guys can have big seasons, I think that we can expect some big games from the Western Force. And I don't think it's as dire as you might be thinking, Ando. Simon, what are your overall thoughts? And then we'll finish up.
I think the final thing I just want to say is about the Western Force or the Sea of Blue in general. We're passionate and we're just happy to be here.
Well said. Well said. All right. Well, that finishes up our Western Force preview for this week. Thanks everyone for getting to this point of the podcast. We will be back next week. I think next week may be the Waratahs. So we have an interview with Jason Gilmore, which will be out on Monday, and then we will do our preview, which will come out on Wednesday. So do tune into that. This one's gone for about an hour and 15 minutes. That means the Waratahs one will probably go for 4 hours. So I'll apologize in advance.
Very excited. Well, it's been good, boys. Thank you so much for your time. Hope you all have a wonderful week, and we will catch you later. Bye.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.